All right, here we go. Episode 23 of the Trilogy Lacrosse Theater. Excited to bring Chazz Woodson, aka Coach Woodson, as your name implies, onto the podcast, webinar, whatever you want to call it. Chazz, how are we doing?
Life is good, man. Life is good. I got no complaint. Well, got a few. We're doing all right. I'm holding up.
Good. And you're coming from South Florida, right?
Correct.
Down
here in Miami. 15 years this week, actually.
Yeah. We can dive further into it, but why? How did you end up in Miami, and now you're like almost like a true Floridian at this point?
It's weird, man. So really, I always had this intention of moving to Miami. I had no conception of what Miami really was. I had never been here. I don't have any friends or family here, or I didn't at the time. I still don't have any family here. I never had any friends here. It was just somewhere I wanted to be, and I ended up getting the opportunity to come down through Teach for America. Just keep thinking it and willing it into existence, and I got this opportunity. I applied. At the time, Miami was, I think it was the third year of the Miami Corps for Teach for America, and it's a tough place to teach in those environments. And so I think first couple of years they had a large turnover and a lot of people that didn't stick with it. So they were really focused on, number one, building it to be bigger, but number two, making sure that they got people that were really committed to the work. And so I landed it, and here I am 15 years later.
Wow, no income tax. I mean, you're living the high life down there, right?
Something like that.
Awesome. Well, I think we talked last week. We got the opportunity to have a LA Riptide reunion, and thanks to you, I think you were really the driving force that spearheaded making that a reality, which was so much fun. Guys we hadn't seen in 13, 14 years. It was awesome, from not just the players, but the staff and doctors.
It was such a great time too. I mean, like I still say, if you ask anybody that was on one of those teams, like if you notice, we had guys that got cut, guys that retired. Like if you ask anybody, being a part of that was a special thing. And I've spoken to a lot of guys that didn't play on the Riptide too, that wish they had. Some of those guys that won championships and had successful careers outside of that, just said they wish they had been able to be a part of something like that.
Yeah, and it's almost impossible to find someone who had a bad experience on that team.
Right.
And like to your point, guys that got cut, they were there for like 1 week. Your teammate at Brown, Dave Madeira, still talks about his training camp for the Riptide and how much fun he had. So awesome. Well, and since that call, I have wanted to get you on here. I think this show we've used as a platform to talk a lot about lacrosse and look at highlights, and you have some of the aka the human highlight reel. You've got some of the most fun highlights to watch, and we'll certainly get to that. But after some of the things that are going on in our country over the last 4, 5, 6 days, and then you could go back to 400 years. I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk a little bit deeper and probably dive into something that maybe a lot of our audience has heard different perspectives, but that's the big piece that I wanted to talk through with you about, is like, there's no right answers here. And I think that's what we're all searching for in this, everyone wants to, I think everyone wants to do the right thing, and different people are trying to do the right thing, and are looking to find answers in a time that answers are really difficult. And I think the biggest thing is, like, I don't think it's fair to ask any one person to come up with the answers, but very interested to hear your perspectives as a Black player growing up in a predominantly white sport and going to an Ivy League institution where you're probably in the minority there, and very curious to hear some of your thoughts and perspectives, because I do think that's important, and that's how we grow, is by getting other people's perspectives.
Yeah, man, there's a lot to unpack there. And it's to me, it seems like there's more and more every day, really. You got the historical context of everything. Then you've got people that are kind of just opening their eyes to things that they really have either consciously ignored or or subconsciously ignored, or have just never had to confront, right? It's never been something that's been on their radar or in front of their face. Then you've got things happening in real time that are completely out of the norm or out of, the collective norm of this country. And so people are really trying to figure out everything from every different angle, whether you're black, white, or whatever. Everybody's trying to figure out where we go, right? And what do we do, and what's the best course of action? What's going to help things? What's going to fix things? How can I help? How can I help other people help? How can I educate people? Do I need to educate people? Should I be educating people? There's so many angles to this, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting for everybody. If you really care and you're really paying attention, it should be exhausting. And so that's what the last few weeks have been for me, just trying to navigate all that, and at the same time, help other people that are trying to navigate it. I think that's one of the things that makes my position in this sport so unique, is that there are a lot of people reaching out to me and trying to figure, and it's a good thing, but it also tells us a lot, tells me a lot, right? If I've got all these people reaching out to me that they need answers or want answers, it's like, well, why are they reaching out to me as opposed to doing their own research, right? Or why don't they have other people that they can reach out to? And that's not a knock on it. I certainly am happy to be of service. I think that's an obligation I have, not just in this sport, but as a black man today, as a black 37-year-old man today, I think I need to do my part. I need to do some educating. I need to do some helping. I need to do some talking, and that's not just to white people or allies or people who don't understand. It's also to people who do understand, and people that are just struggling day to day right now, and people that have kids that are trying to figure out what they say to their kids, and players. So it's a lot. There's a whole lot to unpack here right now. I've got a list. All week I've been trying to write something, but I've got work obligations and things I had to close out this week, so I haven't gotten to it. But every time something comes up or I'm listening to something, I'm jotting notes down. So I got 2 pages of just little notes, not even 2 pages like written things, just little tiny notes that are covering this page right now that I got to somehow piece together for no other reason than for my own sanity, to get it out. So there's a lot. I got a lot going on, and so does the rest of this world right now.
Yeah, and I think I definitely want to. I've seen the word exhausting, and I think it's absolutely true. And to the point you just made, as one of the fewer, and it's amazing to look now how many more black faces there are at the highest level of the sport, which gotta imagine is trickling down into the youth levels. But certainly, don't want to put additional burden on anyone. And I think to your point, it's like it's about educating, and it's about understanding perspectives, because I do feel like everyone's different, right? Everyone's got a different perspective. Your perspective growing up in Virginia and going to Brown in Rhode Island is completely different from someone who grew up in Dade County and went to a historically black college. There's so many different ways, but I do think you look at all of what's going on from the top to the bottom. I think if people just had a little bit more understanding of each other, to me, the biggest thing that I'm seeing is like, if people could just sit back and de-escalate things a little bit, that would solve a lot of these problems. If we could take the time to de-escalate, from I don't know if you saw this Buffalo video of the older gentleman getting pushed over, like that didn't need to happen. It's like those things that if people just were thinking of each other a little bit more, I think could go a long way. And kind of circling back and to some of those notes, and maybe try to give you a little structure to maybe pick out some of your best tidbits that you've put down from those 2 pages. But like, I think people like myself and people who feel like, we want this world to be a better place for everyone, and we want black people to feel completely equal, and like, there's no one answer for it, but is there anything on there that you're like, if I was going to say, hey, go out and do one thing today, what would that one thing be?
Man, one thing. And I got plenty. I think one of the things that you just mentioned is that you said Black people. I think that's a huge component of this, right? Like, we know there are systemic issues that involve the oppression of people of color in this society. But there is no one group, save for perhaps Native Americans, that have been more oppressed in the United States than Black people. And that goes along with the whole idea of Black Lives Matter, right? Like, yes, we know all lives matter, but Black lives have traditionally, systemically not mattered, right? So yeah, I think being intentional about the words we say and about what we're addressing and what we're speaking to right now, I think that's a big piece. I think you've got to be very comfortable being uncomfortable. I think you've got to be very comfortable digging into some things that are going to make you uncomfortable, right? So it's not just seeing, it's not just listening, but actually going to find some things and finding the history of this country. One of the things that one of the resources that I always suggest people listen to, or not listen to, but watch, is The 13th. On Netflix, which is a phenomenal history of or documentary on the history of policing and criminal justice in the society as it pertains to Black people. That provides context, I think, for a lot of this, and I think it's not going to tell you everything you need to know, but it certainly provides great context and history for why we are where we are. Another really short piece that I've been directing people to is Sean King's podcast, and he has one episode that's just entitled "Are You Racist?" And you can find it on Instagram. I'm sure probably elsewhere as well. But I think what's important about that particular one is again, it's more framework, and the idea behind it that he gets to is that the opposite of racist is not racist. Right? Like, everybody wants to say, I'm not racist, or my friends are not racist, or the police are not racist, or I don't have he uses the phrase, I don't have a racist bone in my body, right? Like, yeah, we know that. But he gets to it's not racist, it's anti-racist, right? Like, are you doing all the things that you can do in order to identify racism, in order to combat racism, in order to bring it to light? So I think little things like that, just going and educating yourself. And then, of course, there's millions and millions of books and videos and resources that you can tap into. Two books that we're actually doing as a faculty this summer are, one is White Fragility, and the other one, I'm blanking on the name right now. It'll come back to me, or I'll see it on one of my notes somewhere. But just, again, resources in terms of providing yourself context and a real understanding, a foundational understanding of why we are in this space. So you can do all the posting you want and talking you want and shouting at the top of your lungs and marching, and I love it, and that's great, and I think we all need to do those things. But we also have to have an understanding of why we're doing what we're doing, right? It's not just because George Floyd was killed. That was the catalyst that was the match, right? That set off the bomb that's going on right now. But that's not everything that's at play here. And there are so many other things beyond just policing, right? Policing is at the front and center right now. But there's so many other factors involved in systematic racism and systematic oppression that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, and that 13th is so eye-opening to that systemic piece of it. And, you know, I think that's, to me, maybe the scariest but also most hopeful piece of this is, like, you watch that video and they talk about, you know, just quick, short synopsis of part of it is like that the war on drugs and the war on crime in the 80s, you have a whole generation of Black fathers, Black role models that end up in jail. That was 30 years ago, and that's still the effects of that are still felt so deeply.
Right.
And that, to me, I think is probably what scares a lot of people, is like, this is not a quick fix, right? It's 400 years. 400 years, and then even in the last 30 years it's like ramped up, or you could argue just, changed the way it's happened. So, shifting gears into that systemic piece, I mean, I think that's where, and talking about hope, actions speak louder than words, right? You can go out, you can march, but it's sustained effort over time to elect new officials, to put policies in place that take time to have results. And you really don't even know the results of those until it's 10, 15, 20 years down the line. So anything that you've kind of, on the systemic level, that you've started to outline or had thoughts about?
No, to be honest with you, I'm so, right now, my mind is so jumbled. I'm still trying to work through everything. I want to say voting, right? But I do believe in that. But I also believe that it's not just showing up in, November and voting for whoever. It's the local elections are what I think is significantly more important, and it doesn't get enough push. But it doesn't get enough push from the right people at the right times, and hopefully maybe we're at a point right now where the spotlight is on that, and people realize how important those are. But that matters in terms of getting people in the right places, and at the state level, at the city level. When it comes to housing, when it comes to all these little things that have traditionally been used to keep people in certain places, socioeconomically, geographically, and otherwise. So I think that's the one thing from a systematic standpoint right now that I've been able to wrap my head around, and I know that's not the sole answer, kind of to your point earlier, and I'm still working through what that is, but we got to do a better job of educating ourselves. I think one thing that I guess, to answer the question another way, I've been trying to kind of remind people that because we have to attack this from so many different angles and so many different areas, it's important that you know what you're good at. It's important that you know what your talents are, what your gifts are, and then how you use those to help in various places, right? Like, not everybody is going to be out in the streets protesting. Not everybody is going to run for Congress. Not everybody is going to run for city council. But if you're an educator, be the best educator that you can be, and make sure you're educating your kids about the right things, right? Like, if you're a coach, make sure you're creating spaces for players of color, for Black players, for everybody to not only be successful, right, on a field or on a court or whatever, but also so that they have an understanding of what the world is like when they leave that field or court, right? I always take my guys out to do this particular service project, and a large part of that is, we want to do the service, but also I want them to be in this community and see what they're not seeing on a daily basis, right? I want to expose them to that, so that they have an understanding when they move forward. Some of my kids will never, ever experience anything outside of the community that they live in, right? They don't have to. They don't have to see poverty. They don't have to see destroyed homes, and I don't mean that physically. They don't have to witness or experience the trauma that is a result of years and years of systemic oppression in this country. It's very easy to turn away. It's very easy to not even have to turn away, just not see it. And they could go their whole lives like that. So if the only thing that they see regarding these communities is what they see on TV, or what they see on the news, or when they see a riot, or when they see somebody going to jail, or what they see in the movies, you have to realize how we're being programmed and processed all the time. Don't you think it's funny that there's no other music than hip hop music that constantly degrades Black women and Black people. There's no other community that creates music that is discriminatory against themselves. But that music goes through, that music gets okayed because it sells, because people are buying it, right? And it's more popular than positive music. It's more popular than music that talks about Black pride and Black power. And but the people at the top of that food chain are white people, by and large, right? Like the ones who are writing the checks and the ones who are, determining what gets played on the airwaves. And there's so many little different angles of this that I think we all have to be aware of, but we all have to be ready to address using what we're best at. So I find out what you're best at, educate yourself, and then see where that mesh point is. See what you can do to attack.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that. Like, what are your gifts? What are you good at? Because it's, it feels tangible. It's like I'm not gonna. I have 2 little kids. Like, I'm probably not gonna drive into New York City and go to the front lines of a protest today. Where else? What are the things I'm doing? I'm interacting with hundreds of kids via Zoom every week for our Trilogy clinics. Can I talk to them at the end of the clinic about the things that are going on in our world? Like, yes, I can. And so I do think that's a great point. And something else you brought up, I think, going back to the systemic piece, is you hear in Hollywood so much about representation, right? And I think that's true at every level of life. Representation in government, representation in music, the music industry, executives, and the highest level of business. I think once we get that level of representation to start being a little bit more reflective of the people that are the consumer, that's where the understanding and the knowledge starts to match up with some of the things that are going on.
Yeah, then we stop seeing campaigns like Coolest Monkey in the Jungle with the little Black kid wearing the shirt, for a company. Like, those things don't happen when you have people in the right places that can say, why on earth would that ever be okay? Why would you think to do that? So.
Well, and another kind of thing that I would be curious to hear from you and your experience. And again, like, right, we're athletes by trade. We want to know what a problem is, be able to think through the steps, how to attack that problem, get better, improve at it, and ultimately be our best. Like, that's our mindset as athletes. So this is a challenging area for a lot of us, because it's like the mental map is, like you said, it's all over the place. It's like, well, I actually don't know what concrete next steps I can take.
Right.
I don't know what sprints I can do to be an anti-racist.
Yeah.
And one thing I thought would be potentially enlightening is, do you have any examples that you can remember from your time in a locker room where someone that is not racist, they're not racist, but they did or said something that you're like, that's probably, like, they didn't realize that's hurtful, but that's like a microaggression, or that's something that they probably could have done a better job of that, or I should let them, or maybe you did let them know. But I'd be curious if anything pops to your mind where it's like, that wasn't, it was someone who's not blatantly racist, but it wasn't anti-racist, that's for sure. And
honestly, I cannot, and the reason for that is there are so many. I mean, like, microaggressions happen so routinely, and without those people ever being conscious of it, and in fairness, it would probably be, or I should be able to call them on that. But that's the uncomfortable position that you find yourself in, or that I find myself in sometimes, is not as much now. Like, I don't think I would mind. Let me rephrase it. There are times right now where I don't mind speaking up. There are other times where the immediate thought of speaking up is exhausting. It's like, why am I even going to bother wasting my breath on this? Either because what it's going to take to explain it is exhausting, or because that person, it's like speaking to a wall. They're not going to get it because they don't want to get it. And so when I think about all the times, you know, as a younger guy, that it happened, that's sort of the same thought process. Like, yeah, I probably should have spoken up, but it either didn't feel like it was going to go anywhere, or it just felt like it was too much. And when you don't have the people around you and the support around you, that's tough. Like, because now you're not going to say anything, but you're still stuck in that environment. So yeah, it's tough.
And now in a situation like that, I'm hopeful, you know, from a lot of what I've been seeing and reading and trying to educate myself, you know, you're in a locker room and someone says something that probably just, again, it's thoughtless. It's not intentionally harmful, but it's thoughtless. You know, having a white teammate step up and say, hey man, that's probably not cool to say. Like, I got to imagine that's when that allyship starts to build, right? And that's where the anti-racism starts to come out, right? So
Sure,
you don't have to be the guy. You don't have to be the guy who's educating, right?
Exactly. And the tricky part there is, number one, they have to recognize it, which too often they don't, because it's so, depending on your perspective, conscious or unconscious, you know what I mean? Like, it's something that is so routine that they don't realize it's a microaggression, or it's something that they don't pick up on because it's just so far gone from their consciousness. Whereas for me, if I hear it, I'm like, yeah, I picked up on that right away, right? And you don't even know you said it, and nobody else realizes you said it. So that's tough. But then it's also, then people are put in the positions of like confronting their friends, you know, and I realize that's tough, but you're either about the work or you're not about the work. That's really what that comes down to. And that's something that I would caution young people about right now, young athletes. I've had some conversations with my players, and they're like shocked because they're having these conversations right now. And this might be the first time in my lifetime that so many people are having these conversations. So many young people are having these conversations, or at least, you know, in the world of athletics and lacrosse that I know of, right? Like, typically it's very, very easy for us to just not have the conversations. What I have found, what I have heard, my personal experience is that people on the other side of this debate, whatever angle of the debate we're talking about, people that are on the, and I'll say it, the wrong side of this debate, don't care about your opinion when they speak up, right? So you can't be afraid to speak up and say the right thing. You can't be worried about losing friends over saying the right thing. You can't be worried about causing conflict over saying the right thing, because the people that are saying and doing the wrong thing and continuing to spit those same things over and over and over, they're not concerned about it because they believe they're right. And sometimes the wrong side has a tendency to be louder than the right side. And so that goes back to being, you know, comfortable being uncomfortable.
And that's the definition of growth, right? And that's where I think a lot of this, the people that are on the wrong side of the argument are unwilling to grow, because it's challenging. It's hard to grow. It's not comfortable.
And we also have to, like, you know, there's this attack on political correctness, and that's fine, because I'm not really like, I'm not Mr. PC, but we do have to understand that there's a difference between PC, right, and saying the right thing or not saying the wrong thing. Like, there are certain things that just because it has been acceptable doesn't mean it's okay, or because it's been acceptable in your community or in your circle, that doesn't mean it's okay. Like, somebody calling you on that isn't about being PC. It's not about you know, trying to stifle what you can say. It's about knowing that what you're saying has ramifications. What you're saying does actually offend people and hurt people, and it hurts those people because of the history behind it, the context behind it, regardless of what you may or may not have meant. right? There's real history behind some of these things, and when certain things are said, they do trigger people. I hate saying trigger people, like triggers that like a new buzzword.
Trigger's your trigger. Triggered is your trigger word.
Triggers like trigger word.
Well, and yeah, I mean, as I thought through this discussion and talked about it, it's like, man, I want to make sure I don't say the wrong thing. But at the end of the day, you just got to trust your convictions and then educate yourself. And if you do those two things, I'm hopeful that based on our relationship and level of trust, like you could be like, hey, Mitch, you shouldn't say that. And I'd be like, you know what, you're right. And here's the reasons why. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And that's probably the only reason why, I am where I am today, because there's been multiple of those opportunities throughout my life where people are like, it's probably not the right thing to say, or I learned like, man, I definitely shouldn't have said that back when I did. So I appreciate that. You saying that's like, look, being PC is different than saying the wrong thing and getting corrected and taking that correction and learning. Right? It's coaching, right? It's coaching.
Exactly. I was just about to say that's coaching, and that's what being an athlete is, right? And being being in the sports world, it happens all the time. You can't take things personally. Like a coach yells at you or tells you certain things, it's not about you. It's about correcting a certain behavior. It's about doing something the right way. It's not personal. And so I think when people get called out on these microaggressions or called out, the first thing is to jump back and be defensive, right? Like open yourself up to listening to why you're being called on something or why you're being told something.
Yeah, and that comes back to that de-escalation, right? If you can take that, swallow that bitter pill for a second, maybe have your initial, your tough moment where you're like, why is he coming at? And then you're like, oh, okay. And then you listen to what the person's saying and the reasons. I think that certainly can go a long way.
And along those lines, sometimes it's, my father used to always say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. But you also got to understand that sometimes people don't have like the time and calm to make sure they're saying something nicely so that you can understand it and process it, because what you're saying is either currently inflicting so much damage or because it has a history or a historical context of causing so much damage. And so you could say something that has somebody go from 0 to 100 and they're not concerned about your feelings right now. I had a conversation with somebody or I posted something and somebody responded. And typically, like I enjoy engaging in discussion. But when I got it, I was like, I'm actually offended that you responded this way. And I said a couple more things, nothing rude or inflammatory. But then the response back to that was it hurt my feelings that you said such and such or felt such. And I'm like, I haven't responded since. This is like over a month now. The last thing I'm concerned about when I'm trying to actually get you to understand something real is your feelings. Like your feelings are hurt right now because you don't understand. Your feelings are hurt because you don't see yourself in a light that you think I see everybody else in, right? Like if your understanding of my explanation is that I'm attacking you or that I'm placing you in a box with everybody else and your feelings are hurt because of that, sorry, dog. Your feelings are just going to be hurt. And maybe your feelings need to get hurt so you can figure it out.
Absolutely. Well, and again, kind of looking at like examples, I'm blanking on the allegory, but something along the lines of like an injury to thousands or something like, if it happens to a million people, it's easy to overlook, but when it happens to one person, it's really impactful. Right. I read something that Trevor Baptiste put on US Lacrosse recently about an experience he had when he was 17. And just to me, that was like probably the hardest that I got hit by it because of, I know Trevor on such a personal level. I know I know how he would act. And, I think I know how he would act as a 17-year-old, and cannot imagine a cop putting him in that situation or that position based on who he is as a person.
Sure.
And so are there any examples that you have where, like, I think that individualized example to me was the one that I was like, oh my God, how could someone do that to Trevor, who's like the nicest, most respectful kid and just good person.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to have not been in too many situations. That is due to my parents and my family. That is due to my general good sense sometimes of where to be, where not to be. But I have been, I've had little moments. I've been pulled over for nothing, or spoken to in ways that I probably should not be spoken to by authority figures, whether it was police or other authority figures. I was stopped by the cops one time. And it turned out to be something of a funny story, but it just goes back to that random profiling and, in an opportunity, or not an opportunity, but a situation that could have gone drastically wrong had it not been for one person just happened to come by. I was in high school, and we were walking down the street. This is actually at a state tournament, so we weren't like in our home area. A teammate of mine and I were walking just on a walk. We really had no aim or anything. We just had to get out of the hotel for a little bit. We were walking around, and cops roll up on us, like 3 cars roll up on us. Hop out, flashlight, guns pulled. Like, my first reaction immediately, like, hands up, didn't move. Long story short, our coach's wife just happened to be driving by because she had run to the grocery store or something. She had gone somewhere to pick something up and was coming back to the hotel and just happened to drive by and see us. And she was able to talk to the cops. Like, who knows where that goes, if that doesn't happen, if she doesn't happen to drive by. And all of it turned out to be like, they thought we matched the description of somebody that robbed an Outback Steakhouse. And that's right, like, that piece kind of makes it funny, but it's like that. Like, who does that?
Well, the fact that your first inclination is like hands up, don't move, right? Like that. Why should you have to bear that burden of that? Has to be your, Granted, the cops pull a gun on me, I'm probably also going to stop and put my hands up, but at the same time, like I'm probably like, oh, there's a misunderstanding here. Like, I'll be able to talk through this, as opposed to like, oh my God, this could be something really bad.
Yeah, and it was immediate. It was like as soon as the car stopped, and it wasn't like they just kind of rolled up and were looking and then like they rolled up on us, and as soon as they stopped, it was like, boom, and don't say a word, don't move, right? And these are things that you're taught. And you're young. Like, I don't know if you've had, like, I don't know, your kids may be too young anyway, but I don't know if you expect to have a conversation about how to deal with cops when you get pulled over or in the street or whatever. These are routine conversations, and I know everybody's heard that, but it's real. Like,
right.
Those are conversations that are had in Black families. How do you deal with the police officers if you are pulled over? Or if you encounter them walking down the street, or what, like, those are things that some people don't ever have to talk about.
Well, and that kind of is a good segue. I have a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. So, that's the other piece of this is like, they have, they're so innocent right now. And my wife and I tried to talk to our 3-year-old a little bit about race the other day. He said, race cars? And I was like, maybe we'll wait a little bit longer. So, but I think that piece of it, and be curious to hear your perspective, especially working with, you work with middle school kids primarily, right?
Oh, and coach high school and then teach middle school.
Yeah. So, how young have you seen where it's been impactful with the kids that you've worked with, and when does that need to start happening in your eyes? Again, everyone has perspectives, but from your perspective.
What I would say is this, and kudos to some of our students who have done some presentations with the faculty and shared some real stories and insight that they have. And those are high school students, but they're all coming back and saying that the conversations that they're having as high school students needed to have started in middle school, and that they would be in a better place right now had they started those conversations in high school. And those are Black, Asian, white student, like all over the board. I have always said that. I think middle schoolers are ready for these conversations. I think they're having them anyway. I think their parents are talking, are informing them positively or negatively, consciously or unconsciously, right? Because they're paying attention to what their parents are saying. And so if we're not on the right side of that in terms of educating them, you know, I don't want to say counter to what their parents are telling them, or supporting what their parents are telling them, neither way, but just giving them the right tools and giving them the tools to process things. It's not just about telling them information. It's about teaching them how to look at things, teaching them how to understand things, teaching them how to question certain things. I think certainly in middle school, that's, you know, once they're 12, 13, 14 years old, those things have to start happening. But I'll also tell you that there are a lot of kids that are younger that see these things in their communities or hear about these things. And depending on where you are, right? Like a 10-year-old in New York City, a 10-year-old Black kid in New York City is having a very different reality and upbringing. And they can be two-parent home, in a private school, whatever, right? Like, but their reality and what they see on a daily basis is different than some kid in, you know, the suburbs of South Carolina, you know, growing up there and not having to witness anything.
Well, like it or not, this is kind of forcing that into the forefront, right? And that's part of this.
And now they're all seeing it, right? Like, especially sitting here in quarantine, you got the news on all day, like internet, YouTube, all this stuff, like they're seeing it, and now they have to process it, and they're seeing it younger and younger. Like, it's every kid that's 9 years old now has a phone, or, you know, however old they are. I think a lot of 9-year-olds have phones right now, which is crazy. I don't know. Fortunately, I'm not having to raise a kid right now. I was just, you know, kind of jokingly, one of my friends was talking about, you know, all this stuff is going on, and she's got a baby on top of it. And I was like, well, yeah, well, at least your baby's not 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 right now, and you actually have to explain all this stuff. But yeah, I think the conversations have to happen at a young age. I spent a semester teaching in New York when I was in college, and we had some very real conversations with those kids, and they were fourth graders. And they can handle it. You know, it obviously it has to be age appropriate, but they can handle the concepts and the conversations. And we need to trust that. We try to shield kids from so much, and we should, because some of this stuff, even for me right now, like watching this stuff is like PTSD, right? Like every time you turn around, you're getting slammed with it. And so you have to gauge that, but at the same time, you have to give them knowledge. You have to help them to understand. You have to help them to process it. Otherwise, they're going to process it on their own. And like I said, from an educator standpoint, we don't know what these kids are getting at home. We don't know what their parents are necessarily saying to them, or how they're processing it, or what they're telling them about those people. And so it's important that we give them the tools to think critically and to process on their own, so that, you know, all this stuff starts in the home. It starts with what you're learned and what you're exposed to and what you're not exposed to and what you never learn. You know, again, that goes back to from attacking this from a systemic standpoint, right? Like history books are, you know, history is written by the victors. And so there's so much history that is never taught, never told. And, you know, we've got to change that. We've got to change what we're taught in schools and what they're teaching in schools. So, yeah, there's a lot, man. But I think to answer your question, we got to start them young. You got to start them young. I don't know exactly what that age is for every family or for every school or community, but at least by middle school, 6th, 7th grade, you got to start to talk about these things.
Yeah. Well, you know, this has been super enlightening for me, and frankly, could continue going on.
Yeah, for sure.
All day. You are the human highlight reel, so I would love to show some of your lacrosse highlights, but I do want to also not, you know, move away. Is there anything else that you feel like is really important to get off your chest, or that you feel like has been an eye opener for you over these last couple of days?
You know, I think you mentioned it, and you know, my story was not nearly as drastic as some of the stories that you'll hear from people, and I'm very fortunate for that, right? Like that situation could have gone crazy wrong, but it didn't, and I'm happy about that. But because it could have, like the fact that it could have is important. Any one of these situations that we see on the news could have been me, could have been one of my friends, could have been one of my family members, and very easily. And I think that's one of the things that people don't want to believe. I remember in 2012, that season, I believe that was exactly when the Trayvon Martin situation happened. And I had on my cleats, I said, I wrote, "I am Trayvon." And I remember being in a game, and the defender out there I was playing against looked down, and he read it, and he was kind of like, "Hey, what's up, man?"
I say hi to Chazz. Chazz played on the Riptide. You wear the Riptide helmet in the jersey.
What's up, boss?
I say hi to Chazz. All right.
Little Mitch, crazy.
We're talking, okay? You can read books on the bed if you want.
And yeah, but the look of like disgust and anguish, or not anguish, but like, you know, disregard for the idea that I would be in support of Trayvon Martin, who was gunned down by some, you know, like random, you know, wannabe cop. It could be me, or it could be, you know, Miles Jones, could be Kyle Harrison. It could be, because when you're walking around, they don't know that you went to Hopkins. They don't know that you went to Brown. They don't know that you went to Duke. They don't know that you have a 4-year degree or a master's degree. They don't know that you're a professional athlete. They don't know that you have a lot of white friends, right? Like, it could very well be any of us. And I think one of my thoughts, and this I guess is the kind of the point of it, a thought that I routinely have when these situations occur is that there's a lot of people who like me, who are my friends, who follow me on whatever, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, right? Like, people who are well-meaning, people who love me and love Black people and this, that, and the third, but don't think any of this stuff is a real problem and think that people are making it up. A thought that I routinely have is that they wouldn't get it, or I wonder if they would get it if it were me. Like, would I have to die for them to get this? Would I have to be shot by a cop for them to understand this? Like, and the fact that I have that thought is disturbing. It's really disturbing, but it's a legitimate thought that I have routinely when this stuff happens. That's like every time I see somebody that I think I know, or that somebody that considers me a friend, when I see them like disregarding all this stuff, my first thought is I would have to die for this, for them to understand. Because then what is it? Then is it like, well, I love that guy, but he must have done something. Like, something had to have happened. Like, what happened? Like, it couldn't be this. Like, are they that stuck in their ways? Or would that be the eye-opening thing? Like, does some black dude they know have to die for them to really believe?
And I'll be honest, right? That how hard the Trevor Baptiste thing hit me, that's kind of a good indicator, right? It's like, it took someone that close to me having an experience that ended up being completely fine. So it is a challenge. And like, that's where we all have to get better being empathetic and understanding where people are coming from in this, because it's hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And even harder in a culture that is so divisive right now. So I think that's where hopefully this gives people an opportunity to at least open their mind to that possibility, whether or not they do it. And again, actions speak louder than words. There's no quick fix. But if this helps one person be like, you know what, I need to think a little bit harder about what it's like to be black in lacrosse, to be black in America, then at least they're having that thought, and that can spark some action in the future that maybe goes in a better direction as opposed to a negative direction. And then we just got to make that happen on a wide scale, right?
Real.
So George is narrating his first book of lacrosse. I don't think you're in there. There's some good shots of some MLL guys though. Joel White's in there. Joel White's his favorite player now because of that.
It's not you?
No, I'm not in the book, so I didn't make the cut.
Jeez, man, on the wall, but you're not in the book, so it doesn't matter.
He doesn't spend enough time in this room, I guess. We're gonna have to make him start sleeping in here. Well, yeah, Chazz, I just want to, first and foremost, say thank you. I like you said, I don't want anyone to feel like they have additional burden given all the mental challenges that this has put on everyone. But I really appreciate your insight, appreciate your perspective, and have taken away some really good things. I think I'm hopeful I can enact in my day-to-day life, and if nothing else, that we can spread this message to some other people so they can do the same.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the time.
Well, should we get into some lacrosse?
Yeah, let's do it. Why not?
Awesome. Well, I know you've got other stuff going on, but just briefly, I couldn't find any. We talked about this. Like, the only stuff we have of us in college is on DVD, and none of us have a DVD converter. So I couldn't find any Brown highlights, but I've got some good LA Riptide where we spent time together as a team. Got your New Balance commercial, which was you were the first. Correct me if I'm wrong. First New Balance athlete, right? Lacrosse athlete.
Lacrosse athlete. First New Balance lacrosse athlete.
And then you and Mikey Powell getting a little stop motion video going.
That was cool. I don't know if you're gonna show that, but are you gonna show that?
Let me see. I think I have your first New Balance commercial. I can pull up the Mikey video though. Sorry, the Chazz video that also features Mikey.
So the cool thing about the shot with MP, or the commercial with MP, was we first of all, it took us, that's a 30-second spot. It took us 9 hours to shoot. There was like a 2-hour rain delay. We shot that at down in Durham at Duke.
Here, let's get this going while you describe. We gotta give the people what they want.
So that was there's a 2-hour rain delay, but there were 7 hours of actually shooting. But what's really cool about it is these are all still photos.
Oh wow!
So there's no video in this whole commercial spot.
So that's why it took 9 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
And who was playing defense?
How difficult it was to take a picture with me posing in the air like that for so long.
Who was playing goalie and who was playing defense out here? Do you remember?
Yes. So I don't remember everybody that was in it, but Brett Bucktooth is in there. I think he's a defender. Kevin Lavelle is. Is it Kevin Lavelle? I think Kevin Lavelle is the goalie. I think. Don't quote me on that, but I know Brett Bucktooth is in there. It was fun. It was fun shooting that. But like I said, yeah, man, those were all still pictures that I don't know how many it took to make that, but it was pretty cool. And just like seeing them shoot certain things, and then we go back and look at every shot on the camera.
And where'd you guys film this?
That was at Duke.
At Duke, that's what you said. And so you obviously did it at night, right? So what time did you start and when did you finish?
Oh, man. So we got out there. We did some, like, random, like, interviews and some just other random shots at, like, I want to say maybe 2 o'clock, like, mid-afternoon. And then we did some other – there were some other, like – brand promo things that they were doing. We probably started shooting the commercial itself like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And we didn't leave there till easy 12:30. And it might have been later.
All right. I was thinking you were going like a 9 p.m. start to like 3 a.m. in the morning.
No. We started because we shot it, I want to say, in like early February. So, it was still getting dark early, but let's say 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Yeah, probably about 5 o'clock. Whenever it got dark, whenever it first got dark, that's when we started it. And then we had a 2-hour rain delay at like 9. That's what killed it.
Makes for good shots though. The misty air, the walk.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That helps. Well, I love this one because this shows some Riptide stuff in it.
Yeah, man. So I signed to Brian 2007, right after this season. This was 2007, and then I signed to New Balance right after the 2008 season, which like that would have been, as going into our next year with the Riptide, and then they folded. So then I ended up in at Chicago, which is where that blue is coming from. And so that was the first reveal of the blue uniforms. That was before they had even switched over. They were still red and white.
That's right. They had the red and white use. I love this uniform. This is the All-Star one. This was in Denver. This was like 20,000 people there, right?
Yeah. I think that's top 2 All-Star uniforms they put together.
Yeah, they had the dragons on the side, right? Was both dragons, or just the white team was dragons and the other?
Both. And I still have the shorts. That clip before,
yeah,
diving behind the goal is always one of my favorites because
is that on Gable?
Because I think it's dope. Like, it's just one of my favorite like things. But look at like right there, that layout on the replay. But what was really cool about it to me was a year before that. I've told this story a bunch lately because that clip started popping up this spring on Instagram on various accounts. But what was really cool about that to me was a year before that, Mike Powell had his behind the goal where he dove across. But he and I had talked about it. So I had been thinking of that shot for like a year. Like, it'd been in my head, like, I got this, or more than a year, actually. And so we're at practice, or after practice, MP comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, man, I got one that's going to change the game." And
so you had already been thinking of it, and he said,
I had already been thinking of it. He says it, and I'm like, he's going to take my goal. He's going to take my goal. So we talked about the shot, like, in that moment. And he did it about a week after that. And
he just cleared the net and wrapped it around. You went like over the crossbar and wrapped it around.
Well, he did it, And everybody was like mind blown. And I was like, shit, we just talked about that. Like, we just talked about that, and he beat me to it. And then so it took me another year to get to it, but it happened.
And when you did like the behind the goal or any kind of dives, is that something that you would predestine, or did you read the defender and be like, oh, I guess I can, or is it a mix of the two?
I the time I read the defender, there are a few times where I kind of predetermined it. Like, over the top is easier to predetermine. The
Right.
dives you have to kind of read everything.
Well, because dives you have the opportunity to come in front or behind, right? With over.
Yeah, in front or behind, or you have to you have to have an exit plan when you're going to do those. Because if things close up, you're going to kill yourself.
Right, you're just going right in the back of the net. That's rules.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things that I kind of remind people is, like, there's an art to diving, and it's a skill. Like, you actually have to read certain things. You're not just taking off and jumping at all costs.
Well, in that high risk, high reward, yeah. Who gave you the hardest time about not scoring on one and going into the crease? Anybody?
In terms of, like, just trying to keep me from doing it, you're saying?
Yeah, or like Ryan Boyle's got a reputation for giving teammates an earful if they don't, if they step in the crease or do something like that, a bad possession. Was there anyone like, come on, Chazz?
Good question. Not so many people. I think what I got more of was, like, a couple coaches kind of saying, pick your times.
Yeah.
Which, yes and no. It's like, here's the thing, if Steph Curry is shooting the ball, you're not telling him to pick his times because he's a shooter, right? If Rabel is going down the alley, you're not telling him to pick his times. He's going down the alley. Like, that's what he does. Diving, getting to the creases, what I like, that to me was as high percentage of shot as anybody else taking any other shot in the game. And so occasionally I took offense to that, but not a ton. Like, there are certainly some times where there were better options than me diving, and that's the deal. But that's, like I said, that's the same as anybody taking a shot going down the alley. Certainly it's a high percentage shot for some guys, but a lot of times there are better things that could be done than you taking that shot on the run, 15 seconds into the shot clock.
Well, bottom line, you go in the crease, you get a quick time to get back and drop. You take it on the run alley shot, that could be transition going the opposite way right away, right?
Exactly. So there's a lot that played into it. Like, I wasn't as reckless as I think maybe people thought I was. But guys that played it well, Gittleman played it well, sort of. He got me on one good where I think I had him beat, but he got me in the hip and like right on the bone, and I lost the ball in the air. But Schwartzman used to play it really well because he would step out early. And he was big enough, and he would try to. I say early, but he actually timed it really well, right? Because you can step out, but if you mistime it, it's still a goal.
Well, I remember facing you a couple times and being like, I think he's going to dive here, and I'm like, I'm not going to get to him, but I'm going to just try to time up when he jams and meet his stick so the ball comes straight across, or just. Like, I remember being like, I just got to time this right. Like, hope
I think we were maybe I think we might have split on those. We might be 1-1. I
feel like that sounds right because I think one time I got it and one time you scored, and I was like, damn it, I mistimed that one. Well, awesome. Well, I know you gotta run, but we always end with some quick hitters. So how about best place to play lacrosse for you?
The Dome. Like, Denver in front of 30,000 people is pretty darn cool, but playing in college in the Dome was a lot of fun, and especially at that time when Cuse was like the team. It's the energy in there is fun. The history in there is fun. And, you know, and you got an opportunity every time you go in there to take down one of the top teams in the nation.
Did you guys play them all 4 years that you were Brown?
We played them all 4 years I was there. We played them to overtime my freshman year at home, which we should have won. We didn't close it out. We were up at the end of the game, didn't close it out. They scored super late, like I want to say under a minute to go into overtime, and then we hit a couple pipes in overtime too, and ended up losing it. And then my junior year, we were up. I think we were up like 4, and then we had a guy get hurt, like a starting senior attackman captain get hurt, and they also dropped into a zone, and we didn't really have an answer to this zone, and they came back and ended up beating us. I don't remember what the score was, but that was a tough one because at the time we were undefeated, so that would have been a huge win.
What year was that?
That was 2004 when they won it.
Quick aside, are these the mixes? These aren't the mixes that you're jumping over here, is it?
No,
Okay.
they're not good, but they're not.
Okay.
I don't think they are.
Okay, that's really how old we are because they were on the Zoom adult last week.
Hey, man, Tuck's son is now the head coach at my high school. How about that?
Guys?
Coach Tucker's son, Ryan Tucker, is now the head coach at my high school. He's the first new coach there in like 40-something years. But yeah, no. So that was the junior year, and then my senior year. Ask Buckley about this one. we're up. We're winning. It's like I want to say maybe I don't remember if it was a timeout or if it was at the end of the quarter. Long story short, his stick gets checked. Illegal stick, down 3 minutes. They rattle off 3, and we lost that game by 1. It haunts him to this day.
Was it illegal too deep or illegal wouldn't shake out?
Wouldn't shake out.
Oh yeah, well obviously because it was 3-minute non-releasable, right?
Yeah, and it was like, and let him tell it, and I won't question him. But he's like, it was a brand new stick. I just strung it. I got it checked before the game. It was all good, and they checked it, and the ball wouldn't come out. And that was back, when everybody was starting to make the sticks that were like super pinch and everything was like, so you didn't have any wiggle room. If the strings were in there and it didn't come out, you were out of luck, man.
Yeah, that's a tough battle at the end of the game.
That one was him. Like, I went on the door. Like, to me, that could happen. The only thing that I really hated about that game, was doing a press conference afterwards, and like we got no credit for like playing well or like it was all like, seemed like you guys were off today. I was like, what? Like, damn, can we get some credit? But yeah, man, that was it.
How about best teammate you've ever played with?
Oh, got a lot, man. Besides Mitch Belisle, I've been very fortunate to play with some great teammates. I think in college, Chuck Towers, a guy who got hurt. Like, I don't even want to start naming names because I'll leave people out. There were so many great teammates that I've played with. Hubbard, K18, Brett, Greg Bythe, like everybody from the Riptide days. Like I'd be hard pressed to like pick somebody that I was like, nah, he wasn't that cool to be around. But in college, I was very fortunate to play with a lot of good guys as well. The Ohio Machine days were great. My last run with the Launch, 2017, those were a bunch of good guys too.
Yeah, back in the home state of Florida, right?
Yeah. No.
All right, well, we'll end on this one. If you had to pick one lacrosse memory that was your ultimate best lacrosse memory, which one's standing out at the top?
Yeah, so I always go to this one, and I've got some good memories, but this is my favorite, man, because I think it just objectively it paints a picture of who I am, but I think like personally, it just was one of those great moments where I was happy. I was very happy. Um, I mentioned earlier that I spent the semester in New York teaching, and you know, set this project or set up this project for the kids about choosing positive role models and setting goals for themselves and all this stuff. And it was just so impactful and so like fun. And the kids were awesome. And I called back to Brown and I said, "Hey man, like, is there any chance we can get these kids up for a game at some point?" And they were like, "Yeah, done. Like, we'll make this happen. We'll figure it out." But the short answer is yes, we can make that happen. And so they end up coming up to our last game of the season at home against Princeton. And to give why it was so powerful for me, like in context, I went into that game, I think, like 1 point behind Ryan Boyle, and total points at the time. And I end up with no points that game. I don't know how I got blanked, but I did. No points, no goals, no assists. We lost the game.
It's probably Dan Coco's yellow covering you, right?
Exactly. Going into that game, I think if we had won that game, we might get into the tournament. You know the days of having no Ivy tournament.
Coin flip for the three-way tie. Oh, yeah.
Exactly, and I think that year everybody kind of beat up on each other a little bit, so that was a huge game for us. So no points, lose the game. But as I'm walking off the field, like I've got 20 kids, some of their parents, all like they had signs and T-shirts, and they were all cheering, and like they came up early, they had lunch, they spent the day touring the campus. Just a lot of like really cool, fun stuff for them. Some of those kids had never been out of the city, but to like hit such a low point from an athlete standpoint, and then look up and realize like, yeah, but this day was so much bigger for so many other people, and you had a part in that. That was huge for me. So that's always my favorite moment, lacrosse wise.
Certainly puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
Well, that perspective, I think, has kind of been the theme of this talk so far, and I can't say how much I appreciate. I think the fact that not only what you've done in lacrosse on the field, off the field, but now that you're a fellow educator teaching both the sport and kids, I think that's something that is really powerful and really can't say enough about you as a person and how much I enjoyed our time together, even though it was brief on the Riptide, but then getting to know you over the years. So thanks so much for opening your heart to me and to us, and hopefully to people who get to watch and listen to this, and hopefully can chip away at something that's really important to
man. The pleasure is mine. Thank you for having me. I always appreciate any opportunity I get like this to share and just be a part of something a little bit bigger. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, have a great weekend, Chazz. Thanks again, and I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
Do the same, man.